everyone and welcome back to a new video. So today we're going to be doing my January reading wrap up and going through all the books that I read in the month of January. First of all, let's run through some stats. So I read 7 books in the month of January and 3 of them off my January TBR. I kind of just went off track and just got lost in there. To be honest, I picked my January TBR for like mood reading of what I was in the mood for at the start of January, and some of those tastes changed throughout the month of January because I then got wrapped up in wanting to read fantasy, so kind of changed a little bit. Out of those 7, 2 were romance, 1 was a short story, 3 of them were fantasy, and I don't really know what the other one is classed as. I don't know if it's like literary fiction / horror style. I don't know because it wasn't like too scary, but I think it is classed in like the horror category. 2 of them were read on my Kindle and then the other 5 were physical reads. We started the month off strong, so I read my Bookless book of the month, which was Beg, Borrow or Steal by Sarah Adams, which was newly released in January. Believe it or not, this is a 5-star. My first book of the year and it was a 5-star. This book is the 3rd book in the When in Rome series and we follow Emily and Jack. They were both teachers, or they both are teachers at the same elementary school until Jack leaves town. He then changes his mind and actually moves back to town and ends up being Emily's neighbour, but they have been rivals since college. The story then follows them and how like their relationship develops. So Emily kind of makes this mistake and she wants to get something back, so her and Jack go on this like little heist situation to get this thing back, and then kind of a friendship blossoms from there, and then a romance obviously happens. The romance between these two, I feel like, because they're rivals and they mention it in the story, that the fact that they feel they can be themselves around each other because there's no expectations or anything between them, so they can fully be themselves. Because of this, they're the people that really know each other, so when this friendship and relationship blossoms, it's just honestly the sweetest thing ever. As I mentioned, this ended up being a 5 stars and it's actually my favourite book in the series, and everything Sarah Adams writes is just amazing, and I'm literally just obsessed with this couple, and they're just adorable. They're literally just so adorable. The next book that I read was a Kindle read and it was Frederick Backman's new short story called The Answer Is No. So we have our main character Lucas, who lives in an apartment building. He does not like people. He likes to just live his life of peace. He likes to game. He likes to eat pad thai. He doesn't like to go out of his apartment. He just likes to live by himself. One day an incident happens in the apartment building that causes people to keep coming and knocking on his door, like the board of directors at the apartment, and he just has his life disturbed. It's such a funny story and so unique. It's all this drama is literally over a frying pan, so honestly it's absolutely hilarious. Wrote in Frederick Backman's just really funny writing style. Such a short, quick story, so I would definitely recommend giving it a go. But honestly, so funny and just loved it. I ended up giving it 4 stars and it was literally just such a short story, but some of the characters didn't even have names, like they were just called like Purple Dress or whatever, but you still felt like you knew all the characters. You didn't need to know their names to actually get to know them, but it was just so funny and honestly just highly recommend. And just anything Frederick Backman writes I will read. The next book that I read was so highly anticipated, and that was Assassin's Blade, which is arguably the first book in the Throne of Glass series. My Instagram DMs may disagree, but I am glad that I actually did read this one first. There are 5 novellas that make up this book, so we're following along with, I think you pronounce it Selena? I have no idea, so I don't know how to say her name. I think it's Selena or Selena, but I think everyone calls her Selly? I don't know. We follow along with her life and everything that happens on the run up to Throne of Glass. So I am glad that I did read this one first because I feel like we got more of an insight into her character, and some things happened that caused her to behave this way or be this way or that sort of thing. And literally where this leaves off, it picks up then in Throne of Glass. So I'm really glad that I did read this one first because I feel like I wouldn't have liked going back in time. I didn't realise that it literally finishes and then picks up from there, so I am glad that I did read this one first. And there are some things that happen in here that probably are mentioned in Throne of Glass or the rest of the series, so that probably would have ruined something that happened in here. So I don't want to talk too much about the premise of this story because a lot of people don't choose to read this one first, and there are things in here that can ruin the story. It's just good to go in blind, or literally just know that it is about our main character throughout the series and stuff that led up to Throne of Glass. I've given this one 3.75, so obviously being the first book in a series, or also like short novellas. It took a little bit of a while to get into. It was a little bit choppy in the beginning, but I feel like once I got through a couple of them, I really enjoyed it. I just enjoyed it in general, but yeah, really enjoyed this one. 3.75 stars, but I feel like I'll probably rate other ones in the series higher once I've got into it. The next book that I read was also on my Kindle, and I was kindly sent this book by the author, and it is called Academy of Villains. So it is the first book in a new fantasy series, and it's kind of dark academia meets fantasy world. So in this world there are mortals who don't have powers, and then there are mages who do have powers. The mages are sent to an academy for people with powers to kind of hone in on this ability, learn new skills, learn new spells, that sort of thing, and they're all in different categories, so not everybody has the same powers and that sort of thing. So there's different categories or factions, as you will, for these people with powers. Our main character Kiara is an assassin, and she is sent to the academy to go and assassinate the prince. He is believed to be the key to breaking a curse, so that's why she's been sent there, to assassinate him. But when she gets to the academy, she discovers that she also has powers. She didn't know about this. She hasn't been raised with powers like everybody else, so she kind of then goes through a process of learning how to control these powers, not let them get the better of her. She's doing this while also debating what to do about her mission to assassinate the prince. So it's really interesting. I'm really excited to continue the series. End up giving it a 3.5 star. Again, I feel like just because it's the start of a fantasy series, sometimes it's a little bit more difficult to get into the first book, so there's a lot of world building, a lot of understanding the characters and what's going on, but there are so many more secrets to be uncovered in this series, and I cannot wait for it. The next book that I read was also a fantasy, and that was Kingdom of the Wicked by Karen Maniscalco, which I've heard so many good things about, just this series in general. And then is it the Throne of the Fallen series? Like really good things about that series as well, but people say to read this one first. We follow Amelia, who is a witch, and like I said, this is the first in a fantasy series. I think it might be a trilogy. Her and her sister Victoria have always been warned about evil entities and the devil, and they've always been taught to like cast spells to ward these evil entities off. One day Amelia discovers her sister's body that has been murdered in a series of like brutal witch murders and crimes. It's kind of a reoccurring thing that is happening in their town at the moment, so it's kind of got everybody worried. Obviously not all the townspeople know that these are witch murders, because although they're living in the town and they know each other are witches, the mortals who live there don't know that, so they're kind of just living a normal life. It isn't really set in a fantasy world, it's very much set in the real world, and then there are fantasy elements in here. So when Amelia has discovered her sister's body, she then sets out to uncover who has done this to her sister and why, and what's going on, and why witches are being targeted in the town. Whilst looking for who is doing these crimes, she bumps into Wrath, who is one of the princes of Hell, so she's obviously been warned about them. They basically team up because he's also looking for who's committing these crimes. They kind of reluctantly work together to work through this mystery, but I really enjoyed it, but it did leave it on a cliffhanger, so I need to pick up the next one immediately. But I did end up giving this one a 3.75 star. Again, really enjoyed the story. I think there was just a lot of world building, and towards the end I was kind of confused as to like who had done what, so I think going into the next book it's probably going to be making more sense. I feel I was just a little bit confused towards the end, but again I think because the mystery is not finished, it carries on throughout the series. I feel like there's more to come, so that might make a little bit more sense for me. It might just be me, I might just be confused. After all of those fantasy reads, I kind of needed a palette cleanser, so I picked up Lost and Lassoed, which is the third book in the Rebel Blue Ranch series. It's a small town cowboy romance series set in Wyoming in America, and is honestly just the perfect setting. Like if you love Chestnut Springs, you will just love this series. It is just the perfect quick, easy read, all the cowboy romance vibes you're gonna need. This book follows Gus and Teddy, who we've saw in the previous books, and they have a visceral hate for each other. Gus needs a nanny for the summer to look after his daughter Riley, and Teddy has recently had something happen in her work life that means she also needs to look for something to do. His sister recommends Teddy to be the nanny for the summer. At first he kind of holds off, he's like, I don't really want a stranger in my house, and they're like, well, she's not a stranger, you know, she's been in our family for a long time. So they reluctantly agree to this nanny situation, and then she is there for the summer, and they kind of spend a bit more time together, realise they actually don't hate each other that much, and obviously a romance happens from there, but they viscerally hate each other in the beginning, so it is a very much hatred to lover situation going on. End up giving this one 4 stars. This is actually my favourite in the series so far, and I cannot wait for the last book because you kind of get hints throughout all of the books, specifically the second and third one, as to what's going to happen in the last book, so I can't wait for that. But yeah, ate this up, loved it, and it was the perfect palette cleanser that I needed. Then the last book that I read in January was Graveyard Shift by M.L. Rio, which is the same author as If We Were Villains. So this is just a short story. I think it's just over 100 pages, and this one was the one that I was like, I don't know if it's a horror or not, because it wasn't really that scary, but I think it's marketed as horror. It's a little bit more literary fiction with kind of an eeriness to the story. So we follow a group of individuals who all suffer from insomnia, and they meet up in a kind of abandoned graveyard every evening, not for any like weird reason, but that's just where they meet up. One night when they get there, they discover a misplaced grave that has been freshly dug up, and they're like, that's unusual, this graveyard is abandoned, like no one should be putting stuff in the grave. And they kind of then go on this little mystery situation to uncover what's going on and like why someone's dug this grave and what's happening. So it was really interesting. I ended up giving it a 3-star, I think. It's just a bit random, if I'm honest. Like, it was quite a random story, but I feel like I just needed a quick win towards the end of the month. But yeah, I did enjoy it, and I would still recommend reading it. Like, I liked the mystery aspect, putting the pieces together, discovering what's going on, but 3 stars overall. But I am glad that I read it because it was intriguing me, just the cover, and I didn't really know too much about the premise. Like, the blurb doesn't really give anything away, so I kind of just went into it blind. But those are all the books that I read in the month of January. Let me know whether you read any of them or what you read in the month of January. Thank you so much for watching today's video, and I'll see you in another one super soon.